Mr. Patterson had been teaching fifth grade for almost 2 decades. Every morning, he'd unlock his classroom door at 7:15, flip on the lights and watch the fluorescent bulbs flicker to life above rows of empty desks. The room smelled like chalk dust and old books, even though they barely used chalk anymore. His desk sat at the front, a heavy wooden thing that had probably been there since the school opened in the 70s. It was scratched up pretty bad. Someone years ago had carved their initials near the corner. There were dents from dropped staplers and dark rings where coffee cups had sat too long. But it was his desk and he knew every mark on it. The thing about teaching fifth grade is that you catch kids right in the middle. They're not little anymore, but they're not quite ready to be big either. Some days they act like teenagers, rolling their eyes at everything. Other days they still want to hold your hand during fire drills. Mr. Patterson had learned to read them pretty well over the years. He could tell when someone was faking sick to avoid a test, or when a bad mood at recess meant trouble at home. This year he had 23 students. Most of them were loud, energetic, the kind who'd burst through the door each morning talking over each other about weekend plans or whatever video game was popular that month. They'd argue about who got to feed the class hamster and compete to see who could finish their math worksheet first. Normal kid stuff. The kind of chaos that made the job exhausting and wonderful at the same time. But there was one student who was different. A boy named Tommy Lynn. He was always the first one there in the morning, not by 5 minutes, but by 20, sometimes 30. He'd slip into the classroom so quietly that Mr. Patterson would look up from his coffee and find the kid already sitting at his desk, pulling out homework or reading a book. Tommy never rushed, never slammed his backpack down or scraped his chair across the floor like the other kids did. He just appeared like a shadow. At first, Mr. Patterson figured the boy was just an early riser. Some kids were like that. But as weeks went by, he started noticing other things. Tommy stayed late too. When the final bell rang and kids would stampede toward the door, shoving coats into backpacks and shouting about whose mom was picking them up, Tommy would take his time. He'd organize his desk, put his chair up on the table, sometimes wander over to the bookshelf and straighten the books that other students had shoved back crooked. "You need a ride, Tommy?" Mr. Patterson would ask. "Someone coming to get you?" "My dad's coming," Tommy would say. "He works nearby." "It's okay." And sure enough, around 4 o'clock, a tired-looking man in hospital scrubs would appear in the doorway. He worked as a nurse at the medical center down the street, Mr. Patterson had learned. The dad would give Tommy a quick pat on the shoulder, wave at Mr. Patterson, and they'd leave together. The man always looked exhausted, the kind of tired that sits deep in your bones. During lunch, most kids couldn't wait to get outside. They'd race to the playground, fighting over who got the swings or starting elaborate games of tag that involved way too many rules. But Tommy usually stayed inside. He'd eat his sandwich at his desk, quiet and focused, then get up and start doing little tasks around the room, erasing the whiteboard, straightening the chairs, refilling the hand sanitizer dispensers. Mr. Patterson never asked him to do these things. The boy just did them. "You don't have to clean up, you know," Mr. Patterson said one day, watching Tommy wipe down the counters by the sink. "You should go play with the other kids," Tommy shrugged. "I don't mind. I like helping." There was something in the way he said it, not eager or excited like a kid trying to earn extra credit, just matter of fact, like helping filled up time that would otherwise feel empty. Mr. Patterson had pulled Tommy's file from the office a few weeks into the school year. He didn't usually do that unless there was a problem, but something about this kid made him curious. The file was thin. Good grades, no behavior issues, no special accommodations needed. But there was a note from the counselor dated 2 years back. Mother deceased. Father is primary caregiver, works full-time. Student may benefit from additional emotional support during transition period. 2 years. The boy had lost his mother 2 years ago, and here he was, showing up early and staying late, keeping himself busy with tasks nobody asked him to do. Mr. Patterson thought about his own kids at home, how they'd fall apart if anything happened to their mom, how the whole house would crumble. And here was Tommy just quietly existing, filling his hours with small, purposeful actions. In class, Tommy was a solid student. Not the kid who always raised his hand first, but someone who listened carefully and did thorough work. His handwriting was neat, almost too neat for a 10-year-old. His homework always came back complete. During group projects, he'd let other kids take the lead, content to do whatever part they assigned him. He wasn't invisible exactly. The other kids knew who he was. But he didn't make waves. He didn't demand attention. He just moved through each day like someone trying not to be too much trouble. Mr. Patterson started making small efforts. He'd greet Tommy by name each morning, ask him about his weekend, comment on the book he was reading. The boy would answer politely but briefly, never volunteering extra information. Still, Mr. Patterson kept trying. He remembered mentioning one day that his wife did origami, and Tommy's eyes had lit up for just a second. "My mom used to make paper cranes," Tommy had said quietly. "She made 1,000 of them once." "That's impressive," Mr. Patterson had replied. "Do you still make them?" Tommy nodded. "Sometimes." After that, Mr. Patterson would ask about it every few weeks. "Make any cranes lately?" And Tommy would nod or shake his head. And sometimes he'd show Mr. Patterson a small folded bird he'd tucked into his desk. These moments were brief, but they were something. A small connection in a day otherwise full of just getting by. The weeks rolled on. Fall turned cold, and the classroom windows fogged up in the mornings. Tommy kept arriving early, kept staying late, kept being helpful in ways that broke Mr. Patterson's heart a little. He wished he knew how to reach this kid more, how to pull him into the noise and joy of being 10 years old. But some things he knew couldn't be fixed with good intentions. Grief had its own timeline. Loss left marks that didn't fade just because you wanted them to. It was a Friday afternoon in late November when Mr. Patterson noticed something wrong with his desk. The last bell had rung about 20 minutes earlier, and most kids had already cleared out. Tommy had left on time for once, his dad picking him up right at 3 because they had a doctor's appointment or something. The classroom was finally quiet, and Mr. Patterson was doing what he always did on Friday afternoons, gathering up the week's worth of papers and tests, trying to restore some order before the weekend. He was standing at his desk, sorting through a stack of math quizzes, when his hand brushed against something rough on the wood. At first he thought it was just dried glue or maybe gum that some kid had stuck there. But when he looked closer, he realized it was fresh scratches in the wood. Someone had carved something into the corner of his desk. His stomach dropped a little. Vandalism. That's what this was. Technically, school property getting damaged. He'd have to fill out a report, probably make an announcement to the class about respecting shared spaces, maybe even call in the counselor to talk about appropriate behavior. He leaned down to get a better look at what they'd carved. The letters were small and shaky, obviously done with something pointed like a compass from a geometry set, or maybe the sharp end of a mechanical pencil. It took him a second to make out the words because the carving was shallow and uneven. The work of someone who didn't want to press too hard but felt compelled to leave a mark anyway. "Love you, Mr. P." He stood there staring at it for a long time. The afternoon light coming through the windows had turned golden, that particular shade of late autumn sun that made everything look softer than it actually was. Dust particles floated in the air. The classroom heating system clicked and hummed, and Mr. Patterson just stood there, looking at 4 words carved into his desk by a child who felt they needed to make them permanent. His first reaction was still frustration. He'd been doing this job long enough to know that good intentions didn't excuse everything. The desk belonged to the school district. It had been here before him and would be here after him. You couldn't just let kids carve things into furniture because the message was sweet. What kind of precedent did that set? Next week, someone would carve their favorite sports team, and the week after that, someone would scratch in song lyrics, and pretty soon every surface in the school would be covered in graffiti. But even as he thought these things, even as he mentally rehearsed the speech he'd give to his class on Monday about proper ways to show appreciation, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important, something bigger than school property rules and professional boundaries. He sat down in his chair and really looked at those words again. "Love you, Mr. P." The handwriting wasn't just shaky because of the medium. It was uncertain in a deeper way. Each letter looked like it had been started and stopped multiple times, like whoever carved it kept hesitating, kept almost giving up, but then pressed the tool back into the wood and continued anyway. This wasn't casual. This wasn't a kid goofing around or testing limits. This was someone who felt something so strongly that writing it on paper or saying it out loud wasn't enough. They needed it to be permanent. They needed it to last longer than a conversation or a note that could get thrown away. They needed to know that these words would still be here tomorrow and next week, and maybe even years from now. Mr. Patterson pulled out his phone and took a picture of the carving, then immediately felt weird about it. Why was he documenting this? Was he gathering evidence? Or was he trying to preserve something? He wasn't sure anymore. He went home that evening and couldn't stop thinking about it. His wife noticed right away that something was bothering him. They were sitting at dinner and she asked him twice how his day was before he actually answered. "A student carved something into my desk," he said. "Oh no," she replied. "Something inappropriate?" "No, they carved 'Love you, Mr. P.'" His wife set down her fork. "Oh? Yeah. What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? Mr. Patterson pushed his food around his plate. "I should sand it down. File a report. Talk to the class about respecting property." "Should," his wife said. "But are you going to?" He didn't answer right away. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about which student might have done it. He ran through the roster in his mind. Most of his kids were pretty open with their affection. They'd make him cards on his birthday, high-five him in the hallway, tell him he was their favorite teacher right to his face. They didn't need to carve secret messages. But there was one student who never did those things. One student who showed his care through different means. Through arriving early and staying late. Through organizing bookshelves and erasing boards. Through small, quiet acts of service that never called attention to themselves. Tommy. The more Mr. Patterson thought about it, the more certain he became. Tommy sat close to his desk, third row on the left side. He'd have easy access during independent work time, when kids were bent over their papers and Mr. Patterson was walking around helping other students. And Tommy was the kind of kid who would feel things deeply, but struggled to express them out loud. The kind who would need to say something but wouldn't know how to make the words come out of his mouth. By Saturday morning, Mr. Patterson had made a decision. He drove to the hardware store and bought fine grit sandpaper and wood stain that matched his desk. He told himself he was just being prepared, keeping his options open. But when he got home and put the supplies in his garage, he knew he probably wouldn't use them. Sunday afternoon, he sat at his kitchen table with his laptop and typed out 2 different speeches. One was about respecting school property and appropriate ways to show appreciation. It was professional, clear, fair, the kind of speech a teacher should give. The other speech was different. It was about connection and vulnerability, and the courage it takes to tell someone they matter to you. He read both speeches 3 times each. He still hadn't decided which one he was going to use. Sunday evening, his wife found him staring at the photo he'd taken of the carved words. She sat down next to him and looked at his phone screen. "That's from a kid who's hurting," she said quietly. "I know. That's from a kid who's afraid those words might disappear if they're not carved in deep enough." Mr. Patterson felt something tighten in his chest. His wife was right. This wasn't about vandalism or boundaries or professional protocol. This was about a 10-year-old boy who'd lost his mother and was terrified of losing anyone else who made him feel safe. Who needed to know that his love mattered enough to leave a mark. Who needed proof that he existed in someone's world in a way that couldn't be erased. "I can't sand it down," Mr. Patterson said. His wife squeezed his hand. "No, I don't think you can." Monday morning came too quickly. Mr. Patterson woke up at 5, too anxious to sleep anymore. He got to school even earlier than usual, before the custodians had finished their rounds. He unlocked his classroom and turned on the lights and stood there looking at his desk. The carved words caught the overhead light, tiny shadows forming in the grooves of each letter. He'd brought the sandpaper with him just in case. It sat in his bag like a weight. But he also brought something else. A small bottle of clear furniture polish and a soft cloth. He pulled them out and carefully, gently cleaned the area around the carving. He made sure the words were visible, not hidden or obscured by dust or stray marks. He wanted them to show. At 7:30, right on schedule, Tommy arrived. He came through the door like he always did, quiet as a mouse, backpack over one shoulder. But today was different. Today his eyes went immediately to Mr. Patterson's desk, to the corner where the words were carved, and Tommy froze. Mr. Patterson watched the boy's face go through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Surprise, recognition, fear, guilt, and finally, something like resignation. Tommy's backpack slipped off his shoulder and hit the floor with a thud. His hands started shaking. "Tommy," Mr. Patterson said. His voice came out softer than he'd planned. "Did you do this?" The boy didn't move. He was staring at the floor now, and Mr. Patterson could see his chest rising and falling too fast, like he was trying not to cry but losing the battle. Tommy still wouldn't look up. His eyes were fixed on the linoleum floor tiles, and Mr. Patterson could see the boy's hands balling into fists at his sides. The morning sun was streaming through the classroom windows, making everything look too bright, too exposed. Outside, a few early arrival kids were playing on the playground, their voices carrying through the closed windows. Inside, it was just the two of them and the carved words on the desk. "Tommy," Mr. Patterson said again, gentler this time. "It's okay. I'm not angry. I just need to know. Did you carve this?" The boy nodded, just once. His chin barely moved, but it was enough. Then, without warning, tears started rolling down his cheeks. He wiped at them furiously with his sleeve, but they kept coming. "I'm sorry," Tommy whispered. The words came out choked and small. "I'm really sorry. I'll pay for it. My dad can pay for a new desk. I know it's expensive. I know I'm not supposed to damage school property. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The boy was spiraling, his breath coming in quick gasps now, and Mr. Patterson recognized the signs of a panic attack starting to build. He'd seen it before with other students. He moved carefully the way you'd approach a scared animal and knelt down so he was at Tommy's eye level. "Hey," he said. "Tommy, look at me." The boy shook his head, still staring at the floor. "Tommy, please look at me." It took a few seconds, but eventually Tommy lifted his eyes. They were red and wet, and the fear in them was so raw that Mr. Patterson felt it like a physical pain in his chest. "You're not in trouble," Mr. Patterson said. "I promise. You're not in trouble. I just want to understand why you did it." Tommy's mouth opened, then closed. He tried to speak twice before any words actually came out. I needed—" He stopped, wiping his face again. His voice was barely audible. "You're the only one who asks me how I'm doing." Mr. Patterson waited. He didn't rush the boy, didn't try to fill the silence. He just stayed there, kneeling on the floor, giving Tommy space to find the words. "Everyone else just sees me as the quiet kid," Tommy continued, his voice getting a little stronger but still shaky. "Or the kid whose mom died. But you remember things. You remember that my mom liked origami. You ask me if I still make cranes. You notice when I'm having a bad day. You actually care if I ate lunch." The boy's voice cracked on that last part, and fresh tears spilled over. Mr. Patterson felt something breaking open inside his own chest. All those small moments he'd thought were nothing, just basic human decency, had meant everything to this child. Had been the difference between feeling invisible and feeling seen. "Last week," Tommy said, "when I stayed after school to help organize the supply closet, you said thank you. You said I was helpful. You said you noticed how hard I worked." He paused, struggling. "My dad? He's always so tired. He works so much. And he tries, he really does, but he's barely keeping things together. We eat dinner and he falls asleep on the couch by 7. We don't really talk anymore. Not like we used to." Mr. Patterson stayed quiet, letting the boy get it all out. "And at home, everything reminds me of her," Tommy continued. "Mom's chair at the table. The garden she planted that's all dying now because Dad doesn't have time to water it. Her recipe's still stuck to the fridge. It's like she's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And I feel like I'm supposed to be okay now because it's been 2 years, but I'm not okay. I'm really not okay." The boy was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it anymore. His words came faster, like a dam had broken and everything he'd been holding back was finally pouring out. "And coming here, to school, to your class, it's the only place where I don't feel like I'm drowning. Where someone actually sees me as a person, not just as a problem or a responsibility or a sad story. You make me feel like I matter. Like I'm not just taking up space. And I wanted you to know that. I needed you to know that." Tommy took a shuddering breath. "But I didn't know how to say it. I tried to write you a note like 3 different times, but every time I did, it felt wrong. Like the words on paper weren't strong enough. They could get lost or thrown away or forgotten, and I was afraid that if I just said it out loud, you wouldn't hear how much I really meant it. So he gestured weakly toward the desk. "I carved it. So it would stay. So you'd always know." The classroom was completely silent except for the sound of Tommy's breathing and the distant voices from outside. Mr. Patterson's knees were starting to hurt from kneeling on the hard floor, but he didn't move. He couldn't. He was too busy trying not to let his own eyes fill with tears. "Tommy," he said finally, his voice rough. "Come here." The boy hesitated for just a second, then took a step forward. Mr. Patterson opened his arms and Tommy collapsed into them. The boy's whole body was shaking, and he buried his face in Mr. Patterson's shoulder and cried the kind of tears that come from somewhere deep and old and painful. The kind of tears that have been waiting a long time to be shed. Mr. Patterson held him and didn't say anything. Sometimes words weren't what people needed. Sometimes they just needed someone to be there, to witness their pain, to not turn away from it. He thought about this 10-year-old boy carrying around so much grief and loneliness, trying to be good, trying not to be too much trouble, trying to exist without taking up too much space. And then finding one person, one adult who saw him and remembered him and cared enough to ask simple questions. How desperate must that have felt? How overwhelming to finally have someone notice. After a few minutes, Tommy's crying started to slow down. His breathing evened out. He pulled back and wiped his face with both hands, looking embarrassed now. "Sorry," he mumbled. "I got your shirt all wet." "I don't care about my shirt," Mr. Patterson said. He stood up, his knees cracking, and moved to sit on the edge of his desk. The carved words were right there next to his hand. He traced them lightly with one finger. "Do you know what I did this weekend, Tommy?" The boy shook his head. "I went to the hardware store and bought sandpaper and wood stain. I was going to cover this up before school started today. I was going to erase it and give the class a speech about respecting property and appropriate ways to show appreciation." Tommy's face fell. He looked devastated. "But I didn't," Mr. Patterson continued quickly. "I couldn't. Because the more I looked at these words, the more I realized they were trying to tell me something important, something I needed to hear." "What?" Tommy asked quietly. Mr. Patterson met the boy's eyes. "That I matter too. That the work I do, the attention I try to pay, the small things I try to notice, they matter, and I'd forgotten that. After 17 years of teaching, I'd started to feel like I was just going through the motions, like nothing I did really made a difference. But you reminded me why I do this job. You reminded me what it's all about." He gestured to the carved words. "So I'm keeping them. I'm not covering them up, because they're a gift, Tommy. The best gift a teacher can receive. The knowledge that you reached someone, that you helped someone feel less alone." Tommy stared at him, disbelief written all over his face. "You're really not mad?" "I'm not mad," Mr. Patterson said. "I'm grateful." The boy's eyes filled with tears again. But these were different. Lighter. Like something heavy had been lifted. "I do need you to promise me something, though," Mr. Patterson added. Tommy nodded quickly. "Anything. Don't carve anything else into furniture." A small smile tugged at Mr. Patterson's mouth. "And if you ever need to tell me something or tell anyone something, you can just say it. Out loud. Or write it in a note. Or send an email. You don't have to make it permanent for it to be real. Your words matter, Tommy. However you choose to share them." "Okay," Tommy said. "I promise." They heard voices in the hallway. Other students were starting to arrive. Tommy grabbed his backpack from where it had fallen and moved toward his desk, but Mr. Patterson called him back. "One more thing." "Yeah?" "Thank you," Mr. Patterson said, "for trusting me enough to leave those words. For being brave enough to let someone know you're hurting. That takes courage, Tommy, real courage." The boy managed a small smile. It was the first real smile Mr. Patterson had seen from him all year. As other students started filing into the classroom, loud and energetic and completely unaware of what had just happened, Mr. Patterson stood at his desk and looked at those carved words one more time. "Love you, Mr. P." 4 words that had changed everything. That had reminded him why any of this mattered in the first place. By the time all 23 students had settled into their seats, the morning energy was in full swing. Kids were talking over each other about the weekend, trading snacks, arguing about whether it was going to rain during recess. The usual chaos. Mr. Patterson stood at the front of the room waiting for them to quiet down, his hand resting absently on his desk right next to the carved words. Tommy had taken his seat in the 3rd row, and Mr. Patterson noticed the boy kept glancing up at him, nervous and uncertain. Like he still wasn't quite sure everything was actually okay. Like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "All right, everyone," Mr. Patterson said, raising his voice just enough to cut through the chatter. "Before we start on our regular Monday morning routine, I need to talk to you all about something." The room fell quiet. Kids straightened in their seats. When a teacher said they needed to talk about something with that particular tone, students paid attention. They probably thought someone was in trouble. Mr. Patterson moved around to the front of his desk, leaning back against it. The carved words were right there behind him, visible to anyone who looked. He hadn't planned this, hadn't written anything down. But standing there, looking at 23 faces staring back at him, he realized that what happened this morning wasn't just between him and Tommy. It was bigger than that. It mattered for all of them. This weekend, he began, I noticed something on my desk. Someone had carved words into the wood. He heard a few gasps, some whispers. Tommy's face had gone pale, and my first reaction was to be frustrated. I thought about giving you all a speech about respecting school property and following rules. I even bought supplies to fix the damage. He paused, letting that sink in. The room was completely silent now. But then I actually read what was carved, and I realized it wasn't damage at all. It was a message. Someone wanted me to know that I mattered to them, that the things I do in this classroom make a difference, and instead of erasing that message, I've decided to keep it. He turned slightly so they could see the corner of his desk, the small scratched letters. A few students leaned forward, squinting to read them. He heard someone whisper, "Love you, Mr. P." Who did that? It doesn't matter who did it, Mr. Patterson said firmly. What matters is what it taught me. It taught me that sometimes we feel things so deeply that we don't know how to express them in normal ways. That sometimes we're afraid our words won't be heard or won't be taken seriously unless we make them permanent somehow. He looked around the room, making eye contact with different students. But here's the thing. Every single person in this room matters. Every single one of you has probably wanted to tell someone at some point that they're important to you, that they made a difference, that you're grateful for them. But we don't always do it, do we? We keep those feelings inside because we're scared or shy or we don't know how to say it right. Heads nodded around the room. Even the most talkative kids looked thoughtful. So here's what we're going to do, Mr. Patterson continued. We're going to create something together, a place where anyone can share appreciation for people who've made a difference in their lives. It doesn't have to be for me. It can be for anyone. A teacher, a parent, a friend, a coach, a librarian, anyone who's done something that mattered to you. He walked over to the supply closet and pulled out a large sheet of poster board and a box of markers. He'd grabbed them on impulse during his prep period, not entirely sure what he was going to do with them, but knowing he wanted to turn this moment into something positive, something that would last beyond just his conversation with Tommy. We're going to hang this in the hallway, he said, holding up the blank poster, right outside our classroom. And anyone who wants to can write a message on it. You don't have to. But if you feel like there's something you want to say to someone, something you want them to know, this is your chance. He set the poster board on a table at the back of the room and arranged the markers around it. You can do it during free time today, during lunch if you want to stay inside, or whenever you feel ready. There's no pressure, no grade, no judgment, just honest appreciation. The students were looking at each other now, whispering, and Mr. Patterson could see wheels turning in their heads. He could see them thinking about people they wanted to thank, words they'd been holding back. One rule, though, he added. Be sincere. Don't write something just because you think you should. Only write what you really mean. A girl in the front row, Katie Chen, raised her hand. She was usually quiet but thoughtful. Mr. P, what if we want to write something but we're not good with words? Then keep it simple, he said. Sometimes the simplest words are the most powerful. Thank you. You matter. I see you. Those are complete messages all on their own. Throughout the morning, as they worked through math problems and language arts exercises, Mr. Patterson noticed students glancing at the poster board. During independent reading time, a few kids got up and wandered over to it. He watched them stand there, markers in hand, thinking about what to write. Some wrote quickly and moved away. Others stood there for several minutes before making a single mark. By lunchtime, the poster was starting to fill up. Mr. Patterson walked over during the lunch period to see what students had written. The messages were all different. Some were for parents, thank you, Mom, for working 2 jobs, so I can play soccer. Dad, you're my hero even when you embarrass me. Some were for other teachers, Mrs. Rodriguez, taught me it's okay to make mistakes in math. Coach Williams believed in me when I didn't make the team the first time. Some were for friends. Jake has been my best friend since kindergarten and he's never left me out. Sophia helped me when I was new and didn't know anyone. And some were simple statements that didn't name anyone specific but carried weight anyway. 2, anyone who's ever been patient with me, thank you. 4, people who notice when I'm having a bad day, Tommy had stayed inside during lunch. He was standing in front of the poster with a blue marker in his hand, staring at the blank space he'd claimed in the corner. Mr. Patterson walked over quietly. "Having trouble?" he asked. Tommy shook his head. "I'm just trying to get it right." "There's no wrong way to do this." The boy nodded but didn't move. After a minute, he started writing, his hand moving slowly and carefully. When he finished and stepped back, Mr. Patterson could see what he'd written. "To my dad, I know you're tired all the time and things are hard. But you keep showing up. That matters. I love you." Mr. Patterson felt his throat tighten. "That's perfect, Tommy. You think he'll see it?" The boy asked. "The poster's going to be in the hallway, right? We'll make sure he sees it. I'll take a picture and email it to him if you want." Tommy nodded, looking relieved. Then, without warning, he wrote something else in a different spot on the poster. This message was shorter. "Mr. P reminds me why school isn't just about grades." Mr. Patterson didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. He just put his hand on Tommy's shoulder and squeezed gently. By the end of the day, the poster was nearly full. Every inch of white space had been claimed by someone's gratitude, someone's recognition of kindness received. When Mr. Patterson hung it in the hallway outside his classroom, a few teachers walking by stopped to read it. He watched their faces soften as they took in the messages. The principal, Mrs. Washington, came by around 3:30, just before dismissal. She stood there reading the poster for a long time, then turned to Mr. Patterson. "What prompted this?" she asked. He gestured back toward his classroom, to his desk barely visible through the doorway. "A student taught me something important this morning, about connection and courage and what it means to really see people." Mrs. Washington smiled. "This is beautiful. Would you mind if we did something like this school-wide? Maybe make it a regular thing?" "I think that would be great," Mr. Patterson said. When Tommy's dad arrived at 4 o'clock, still in his scrubs, still looking exhausted, Mr. Patterson was waiting. He'd kept Tommy in the classroom on purpose. "Mr. Lynn," he said, walking over. "Do you have a minute? I want to show you something." The man looked confused but followed Mr. Patterson into the hallway. Tommy trailed behind them, nervous again. Mr. Patterson pointed to the poster, specifically to Tommy's message to his father. "Your son wrote this today. I thought you should see it." Tommy's dad leaned in, reading slowly. Mr. Patterson watched his face change, watched his eyes go from tired to shocked to overwhelmed. The man's hand came up to cover his mouth, and his eyes filled with tears. "Tommy," his dad said, his voice breaking. He turned to his son and pulled him into a hug right there in the hallway. "I had no idea. I thought I was failing you, that I wasn't doing enough." "You're doing everything, Dad," Tommy said, his voice muffled against his father's shoulder. "You're doing everything." They stood there holding each other, and Mr. Patterson quietly stepped back into his classroom to give them privacy. He walked to his desk and looked down at the carved words one more time. Such a small thing, really. Just 4 words scratched into old wood. But they'd started something. They'd reminded everyone involved that connection matters, that being seen matters, that having the courage to tell someone they're important is never a waste. The next morning, there were already students gathered around the hallway poster before school even started, reading the messages, adding their own. It had become something alive, something growing. And every time Mr. Patterson walked past it, he thought about how all of this had started with one lonely kid who just needed someone to know he was there. 3 years passed, then 5, then 10. The hallway poster that had started everything got replaced every few months as it filled up completely with messages. But the tradition never stopped. It became part of the school's culture. New students would arrive in September and older kids would explain it to them. "That's the gratitude wall," they'd say. "You can write anything you want on it as long as it's real." Other teachers started doing similar things in their classrooms. The counselor created a bulletin board in her office covered with sticky notes where students could leave anonymous encouragements for each other. The cafeteria staff put up a whiteboard where kids could thank them for their favorite meals. Appreciation started showing up everywhere in small ways in corners you wouldn't expect. But through all of it, through all those years and all those changes, Mr. Patterson kept the same desk. Other teachers would joke about it. "Patterson, that thing is falling apart. Request a new one already." The district offered to replace it twice, once after a chair accidentally gouged a deep scratch across the top during a classroom rearrangement. Once after someone spilled an entire bottle of glue that dried into a permanent sticky patch on one corner. Each time, Mr. Patterson declined. Because right there, in the lower right corner where his hand rested whenever he sat down to grade papers or plan lessons, were those 4 carved words. They'd gotten shallower over the years, worn smooth by time and touch. Sometimes, when the light hit wrong, you could barely see them at all, but Mr. Patterson knew they were there. He'd trace them absently with his finger, while thinking through a lesson plan or during parent conferences. They'd become part of the desk, part of the room, part of him. Tommy had moved on to middle school, then high school. Mr. Patterson would see him occasionally. The boy would stop by during high school orientation day when the seniors came to visit their old elementary school. He'd poke his head into the classroom, taller now, voice deeper, but still carrying that same quiet intensity. "Hey, Mr. P. Tommy, how's it going?" They'd chat for a few minutes. Tommy had joined the school newspaper, was thinking about studying journalism in college. His dad was doing better, had found a less demanding position at the hospital that gave him more time at home. They'd gone on a camping trip last summer, first time in years. Things were good. Not perfect, but good. And every single time Tommy visited before he left, he'd walk over to the desk and touch the corner where the words were carved. Just a brief moment, his fingers finding the faded letters, like checking that they were still there. Then he'd smile, wave, and leave. Mr. Patterson understood. Those words represented more than just a moment of desperation from a grieving 10-year-old. They represented the moment Tommy had learned he could be seen, that he could matter to someone, that his pain was real and his feelings were valid, and that expressing them, even in messy or imperfect ways, was okay. Other students came and went. 23 became hundreds, became thousands. Mr. Patterson taught year after year, watching kids grow up and move on, watching families change, watching the world evolve in ways both wonderful and terrifying. He taught through new curriculum standards and new technologies. He taught through a pandemic that shut schools down and forced everyone to learn how to connect through screens instead of desks. He taught through budget cuts and policy changes and principals who came and went. But that desk remained constant. Those words remained constant. When Mr. Patterson turned 60, some of his former students organized a surprise celebration. They rented out a restaurant and invited everyone they could track down. Teachers he'd worked with over the decades, students from throughout the years, now adults with careers and families of their own. The room was packed with people whose lives he'd touched in ways he'd never fully realized. Tommy came. He was 23 now, working as a junior reporter for a regional newspaper. His dad came too, grayer but healthier looking, more settled. They'd both taken time off to be there. During dinner, people got up and shared stories about lessons that had changed their perspective, about moments when Mr. Patterson had noticed they were struggling and had taken time to check in, about feeling seen and valued during years when they'd felt invisible everywhere else. The stories went on for hours, and Mr. Patterson sat there overwhelmed, realizing that the small things he'd thought were nothing had actually been everything. When it was Tommy's turn to speak, he walked to the front of the room holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. He cleared his throat, suddenly looking young again, nervous like he had that morning years ago. "Mr. P," he began, "when I was 10 years old, I did something impulsive, something that technically broke the rules. I carved words into your desk because I didn't know any other way to make sure you understood how much you mattered to me, how much you'd saved me without even realizing it." He paused, looking around at the crowd. "I thought I'd get in trouble. I thought you'd be angry or disappointed, or that you'd sand away the words and pretend they'd never existed. But you didn't. You kept them. You honored them. And in doing that, you taught me that expression matters more than perfection, that vulnerability is strength, not weakness, that being seen is a gift we can give each other if we're brave enough to pay attention." Tommy unwrapped the package and held up a rectangular piece of wood, beautifully finished and mounted on a stand. "So I tracked down the old custodian who retired 5 years ago, and I asked him if, when they eventually replace your desk, if I could have that corner piece, the part with the words." The room went completely silent. He said yes. "And I had it professionally preserved, because someday when you retire, you're taking these words with you. They're yours now. A reminder that you saw me when I needed to be seen, and that what you do every single day in that classroom with those kids, it matters. It changes lives. It changed mine." Tommy's voice broke on that last part. Mr. Patterson couldn't see clearly anymore because his eyes were too full of tears. The entire room was standing, applauding, but all he could focus on was that piece of wood with those 4 carved words, "Preserved forever. Love you, Mr. P." Later that night, driving home with his wife, Mr. Patterson was quiet. She reached over and took his hand. "You okay?" she asked. "I spent so many years thinking I was just doing a job," he said. "Just showing up, following the curriculum, trying my best. I never imagined that the small things, the little moments of paying attention, would mean so much to anyone." His wife squeezed his hand. "That's the thing about kindness. We never see the full ripple effect. We just cast the stone and trust that it matters." When Mr. Patterson finally did retire at 65, he cleaned out his classroom with mixed feelings. It was time. He knew it was time, but leaving that room, that desk, felt like leaving behind a piece of himself. The district had already arranged for the old desk to be removed, to be replaced with something modern and undamaged for the next teacher. But true to his word, the old custodian had carefully removed the corner section with the carved words before the desk was hauled away. It was waiting for Mr. Patterson in the office, wrapped carefully in bubble wrap. At home, he placed Tommy's preserved wooden piece on a shelf in his study. Next to it, he placed the original desk corner that the custodian had saved. 2 versions of the same message. One professionally preserved, polished, and perfect. One rough and worn, marked by years of use and touch. Both precious beyond measure. The years continued. Mr. Patterson stayed in touch with former students through social media and occasional reunions. He watched them become parents themselves, watched them navigate careers and relationships and all the beautiful, messy complexity of adult life. And sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep, he'd wander into his study and look at those carved words. He'd think about Tommy, about that scared 10-year-old boy who just needed someone to see him. About how a moment of desperation had become a moment of connection. About how 4 words carved into wood had reminded everyone involved what actually matters in this life. Because here's the truth that Mr. Patterson had learned, that Tommy had taught him, that those carved words represented. We're all walking around carrying messages we don't know how to deliver. We all have words we need to say to people who've mattered to us, and we're all terrified that if we say them, they won't land right. They won't be received the way we meant them. They won't be enough, but they are enough. They're always enough, a simple thank you, a genuine "I see you," a heartfelt "you matter to me." These phrases, spoken or written or even clumsily carved into furniture, have the power to change everything. They remind us we're not alone. They prove our existence matters to someone. They create connection in a world that often feels disconnected. Tommy had needed to carve those words because grief had taught him that people and moments can disappear. That nothing is guaranteed, that if you don't make it permanent, if you don't leave a mark, you might lose your chance to say what needs to be said. And while his method had been imperfect, his instinct had been absolutely right. Some things need to be said, some appreciation needs to be expressed, some love needs to leave a mark. Years later, when Mr. Patterson's own health started failing, when age and time caught up with him, the way they eventually catch up with everyone, he made sure those wooden pieces were passed on. He gave them to Tommy, who by then was 40 years old, married with 2 kids of his own, working as an editor at a major newspaper. "These belong with you," Mr. Patterson said. "They always have." Tommy stood there holding the pieces of wood, tears streaming down his face, and Mr. Patterson saw that 10-year-old boy again, still carrying the weight of loss, still figuring out how to express what's in his heart, still brave enough to try. "You taught me that being seen is the greatest gift we can give each other," Tommy said. "I've tried to live that way, to notice people, to pay attention, to let them know they matter." "I know you have," Mr. Patterson replied. "I've watched you do it. You took what you learned and you multiplied it. You made it bigger than just you and me. That's what teaching is really about. Not the lessons in the curriculum. The lessons about being human." After Mr. Patterson passed, Tommy wrote an article about him. About that desk, those words, that moment in a classroom when a desperate child's cry for connection had been met with compassion instead of punishment. The article went viral. Thousands of people shared it, commented on it, told their own stories about teachers who'd seen them, moments when they'd felt truly noticed and valued. And in schools across the country, teachers started looking more carefully at the marks on their desks, started asking themselves if maybe that scratch or that carving or that graffiti was actually a message they needed to receive. Started creating more spaces for students to express appreciation, to share gratitude, to say the things that needed to be said, because that's what Tommy and Mr. Patterson had proven, that we all need to be seen. That we all carry messages worth sharing, that love, even when it's imperfect, even when it breaks the rules, even when it's carved roughly into old wood, is always worth preserving. The desk is long gone now, replaced and replaced again, but the message remains, in Tommy's study, where those wooden pieces sit on a shelf as a reminder, in the gratitude walls that still hang in school hallways, in the small moments when teachers pay attention to quiet students who need to be noticed, in the courage it takes to tell someone they matter to you. Some things, it turns out, don't need to be carved into wood to be permanent. Some truths last because they're true, because they speak to something fundamental about what it means to be human, because they remind us that in a world full of temporary things, connection is what endures. Love you, Mr. P. 4 words that changed everything. 4 words that proved kindness leaves marks deeper than any carving. 4 words that taught a teacher about teaching, a boy about courage, and all of us about what really matters. We don't remember the perfect desks. We remember the ones that carry messages. We remember the moments when someone saw us and chose to honor that seeing. We remember the people who taught us that our words, our feelings, our existence matters enough to leave a mark on the world. And maybe that's the lesson. Not that we should carve up furniture or break rules or make impulsive decisions, but that we should be brave enough to say what needs to be said, to tell people they matter, to let our appreciation show, to stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect words and just express what's real. Because somewhere out there right now, there's a kid who needs to know they're seen, a teacher who needs to know they're making a difference, a parent who needs to hear they're doing enough, a friend who needs to feel valued, and we have the power to give them that, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with simple, honest words that acknowledge their existence matters. That's what Tommy taught Mr. Patterson, and what Mr. Patterson taught Tommy, and what together they taught all of us. That being seen changes everything. That noticing people is an act of love, that the smallest kindnesses create the deepest marks, that we're all walking around with messages we need to deliver, and the only thing stopping us is fear. So say the thing, write the note, leave the message. Tell people they matter before it's too late, before the moment passes, before another day goes by with words left unsaid. Carve it into their memory with kindness. Make it permanent with love. Leave a mark that matters. Because in the end, that's all any of us really want. To know we were here, to know we mattered, to know someone saw us, really saw us, and chose to acknowledge that seeing. Love you, Mr. P. The words that changed everything, the message that stayed.